Hello and good random time of day to you listening. I don't know what time you're listening to this.
This is true. It's like good morning,
Yeah.
good evening, good afternoon.
And in case good morning. And if in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
There you go.
Because, if I can quote the Truman Show, I will. Welcome to episode
42.
That's what I said.
42. It's the answer to life. 42.
The universe and everything.
Yes.
Welcome to episode 42 of the Wayward Dragons podcast.
Yeah. Welcome. We are currently in a mini series about the Satanic Panic. The first episode, we kind of went over the overview terms of the Satanic Panic itself with some general terms. And then Johnny talked about D&D and the Satanic Panic and how they're linked. So in this episode, we're going to talk about cults that rose up during the Satanic Panic. So you're going to be listening to me this time. I am going to do a massive trigger warning before we get into this and we do our hi, how are yous. I am going to be talking about a lot of cults, so that's going to mean I'm going to be talking about a lot of things, including child abuse, abuse in general to people, murder, mass suicide, and just a lot of horrible things in general. So if you're not a big true crime fan, please stop, rewind, and join us on the next episode. So, now that that's out of the way, how are you?
I'm making it. No massive complaints, just kind of skating by in life as I think everyone else our age is.
Yeah, I feel that.
What about yourself?
Mentally exhausted. I know that I'll be okay because there's an end in sight. I just have to remind myself that it's okay to feel overwhelmed. And it's going to be over soon. So it's just a lot of overwhelming things. Got a lot to do and not enough time in the day to do them. But I'll eventually get everything done. It just might not happen on the schedule in which I want it to happen on. So yeah.
Everything happens when it's meant to happen.
Yeah. It's just
as dumb and cliche as that sounds.
I know. So, let's get into this episode. So, we're going to be talking about a lot of different cults. For this episode, I'm going to start with the most present ones and then work our way backwards. So, like I said, trigger warning if you're not comfortable with true crime, child abuse, sexual abuse, just all the horrible things in life in general, please stop, turn around, and skip ahead to the next episode. So the first cult we're going to talk about, it's pronounced NXIVM, just like the heartburn medication. So this cult was actually in the news not too long ago, for a lot of different reasons. It was found by Keith Raniere, and basically he founded this company, NXIVM, and it is a front to a cult called Dose or The View. But basically, NXIVM kind of started out as a company that would hold like self-improvement seminars for people and for companies.
It's a self-help pyramid scheme is what it was.
Yeah. And it roped a lot of like college students in, but it's most famous for roping in the Smallville actress Allison Mack.
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 It's Mack. Yeah, Mack. Trust me, I I was really sad when I found out about that because
That's a
I
good
freaking
show.
loved her.
But basically, it, like Johnny said, it's a pyramid scheme of a self improvement type thing. They would hold these seminars and they would kind of brainwash these people into joining their cult. Behind the scenes, it was a kind of sex slave type cult. He was known to brand a lot of his female followers. Um, they would be blackmailed into staying. And just a lot of horrible stuff happened to them. Eventually, we will go into full length episodes with all these cults at some point to kind of break up all the occult stuff that we do talk about. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of all these. I should have said that in the beginning. This is just going to be a blanket overview of these cults. We're not going to go deep diving into them. That's for a later date. But basically, it was a sex slave, sex trafficking cult. He would groom young students, young female students into joining the cult. They were made to believe that Keith was the super intelligent, super ethical person. He barely passed school with a 2.74 GPA, I think is what Wikipedia says.
Yeah, he was an idiot.
I think.
I mean, well, not to say that people with low intelligence are idiots.
But he was an idiot.
he was an idiot. He was also not very bright. The two are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. But at the height, there were 700 members. There are multiple shows that you can watch about this cult. I want to say there's one on Netflix about this. Let me go down to the end of the Wikipedia page. It'll tell me.
It's like there's a series of, I think it's called World's Most Dangerous Cults, that has an episode of it.
Yeah. Yeah. A&E investigates cults and extreme beliefs. There's 1 hour episode dedicated to the cult. Investigation Discovery released a 2 hour special, The Lost Women of NXIVM, in 2019. HBO released a docuseries called The Vow in 2020, August of 2020. Starz released a docuseries, Seduced Inside the NXIVM Cult. That was released in October of 2020. But honestly, most people know about the cult because of the Smallville actress. She was convicted of like sex trafficking and a couple other charges. I think it said that she's doing community service. And then Keith Rainier was convicted of a lot more charges and will never be released from prison. So, whew. So I need to bookmark that page because I started these backwards. So the next one we're going to talk about is Love Has Won. So this cult became kind of famous or became known because the mummified remains of the founder, Amy Carson, were found in April of 2021. Police found her mummified remains. It was estimated that she had been dead for a couple of weeks by the time the cops had found her. But basically, Amy Carson was the founder of the cult. She claimed to be Jesus Christ incarnated, Marilyn Monroe incarnated, plus 534 other beings. The members called her Mother God. She was apparently 19 billion years old. She claimed to cure cancer and talk to angels. One of the reasons why the police were kind of at the house was there were allegations of child abuse. There were like 7 members that were arrested when they found her body for abuse of a corpse, plus multiple child abuse charges. So that's how the cult got known. But they're mainly known for her live streaming. She would live stream on YouTube, kind of giving her message for the day type thing, and trying to get people to donate and to kind of get these self-care vitamins. So she brainwashed a lot of people, and just like any cult, it's a lot of brainwashing. All the members that she recruited gave all their worldly possessions to her, money. It was a lot of abuse. If you read a lot of the articles and stuff about the cult, she was horrible to people. She would get very drunk and beat people within the cult, beat children of the people in the cult. It was just bad. So those 2 are the most recent that are interesting. The next one we're going to talk about is School of Prophets. So this was founded by Ron Lafferty. He was a self-professed prophet. He was actually excommunicated from the Mormon Church, him and one of his brothers. So they started a splinter group with the remaining brothers, so 6 total. They wanted to reinstate polygamy because the Mormon Church actually got rid of polygamy in the late 1800s, maybe, I think, if I remember right.
Well, that's a whole thing.
I was like, it kind of depends on one article you read.
Well, technically, they did do away with polygamy, but also, like, the main church did, but then it kind of split up.
Yeah. So it depends on what church you're looking at, determines whether there's polygamy or not. But basically in the church you receive revelations, and that's how you communicate with God, is God gives you kind of revelations about your personal life. That's normal. You are seen as a prophet when you receive revelations about the church. And John was claiming that he was having revelations about the church. He had one about his ex-wife. And this was after his ex-wife had fled and removed the children from the home and fled to Florida. And he said that she was the bride of Satan in a previous life. So, but one of the reasons why he made the news and why he is known, the cult is known, is he received a revelation about the murder of 4 people. So apparently God gave him the message that his brother's wife, his niece, and 2 other people had to go, including the person that he saw responsible for his excommunication. He recruited his brother Dan, and they killed his brother Alan's wife Brenda, and their niece. They thankfully didn't get to the last 2 people in his revelation because one was home and they got lost to the last one. So after they killed the sister-in-law and the niece, they fled to Nevada, and thankfully the hitchhikers that they recruited into their cult turned on them, and that's how kind of they were caught and convicted. He's back. I'm sorry. Bala's made himself known today. He's making himself known. He's become very needy the last week. Hi, buddy. You're on my notes, and I need my notes. So the next one we're going to talk about is the Unification Church. So this was founded in the in the 80s. It was first, well, let me back up. It came to the US and became very popular in the 80s. It has been around since after World War II. So this started in South Korea. It came to the U.S. in the 1950s. But what it's most known for is its mass wedding ceremonies. So there's one that happened here in the U.S. in Madison Square Gardens where the founder, if I can find his name, Sun Moon, married over 2,000 couples, and over half of them were matched by Moon himself. But that's what the cult is basically known for, is the mass wedding ceremonies that take place. And the mass wedding ceremonies are still taking place. In 2016, there was a ceremony of over 3,000 couples that were married. Moon actually died in either 2012 or 2013, depending on what article you read. But basically, the cult began after World War II. Moon started preaching when Japan left South Korea. He kind of became fascinated with communism and a couple other things, and just started walking around and preaching. He eventually actually got into North Korea, and he got arrested in North Korea because they thought he was spying because he was from South Korea. He co-wrote a book with his wife and a very early disciple called The Divine Principle, and that is the main belief system for the cult. It is their Bible, and it's written very similar to the Bible. In there are creation myths, and there's original sins and stuff like that, and why they are known for the mass wedding ceremonies. So they have a belief in the serpent seed interpretation of the original sin, and the fall of man. Basically, this is a belief that Eve was sexually seduced by Satan, unless the human bloodline is sinful due to it being directly descending from Satan. So throughout the blessing, the members believe that the couple is being removed from the lineage of sinful humanity, and they're being restored back into God's sinless lineage. It's a lot of weirdness.
I mean, most cults are a lot of weirdness, but
it is. I tried to find the one there was. I'll have to find it, but there's a cult here in the U.S. With a very strong belief about guns. Like it's a church of guns, and they bring their guns to church, and it's.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say the Proud Boys, because that's a cult.
No, we're not going to talk about them. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about that. We're both going to get angry if we talk about that. So the next one we're going to talk about, the famous People's Temple. So before I really get into this, there's an amazing podcast called Case File. Casey does like a 4 to 6 part series, and these are hour-plus long episodes of this whole cult. And he goes into beautiful detail about everything. So this is going to be a lot shorter. So he goes into Jim Jones and everything. So basically, this cult was founded in 1955 by Jim Jones. It started out in Indianapolis, Indiana. They eventually moved to Eureka, California, and then they eventually moved to Ghana in Africa. They are known for what happens in Africa. But basically, Jim Jones becomes very paranoid about a nuclear attack and creating the ultimate paradise. Because you have to think in 1955, kind of what's going on in the world. We have civil rights movements happening, and a lot of racial things are happening. So the church is actually, his People's Temple is interracial, because Jim Jones is African American. And so because he becomes paranoid and wants to create this kind of utopia, he gets land in Ghana, Africa, and they start building this temple type thing, this commune, you can call it. And what they are known for is the mass suicide that happens. So in November of 1978, Congressman Leo Ryan was visiting the compound to investigate claims of abuse that were happening. And while he was there, many members expressed the desire to leave with him. And what happens is when he goes to the airstrip to go back home, some members that didn't want the other members to leave with him attack the congressman and unfortunately kill the congressman along with a lot of other people there. This triggers the mass suicide that happens. Basically, when the members get back to the compound, this triggers Jim Jones's doomsday. I actually did not know, and when I was listening to the Case File, because I love Case File, when I was listening to his series about this, I did not know that he conditioned his members. So he was doing this drill for months beforehand to kind of make sure that they would do this very willingly and there would be no complications. Unfortunately, there were complications, and it was a very sad experience. For a lot of people, it was a very horrific experience. But basically what happens is when they get back to the compound, Jim Jones gives a signal and they start the doomsday. They mix cyanide with grape flavor aid. That's where you get the saying, don't drink the Kool-Aid, don't drink the flavor aid. This is where that saying comes from. And they start passing the flavor aid out to people. Once a lot of the members figure out that this is not a drill, this is actually happening for real, you start seeing people pushing back. They start shooting people. They start forcibly giving them the Kool-Aid, the flavor aid, and injecting babies and other members with the cyanide. In total, including the attack on the airstrip, over 900 people died during that mass suicide and the attack. It is one of the biggest mass suicides recorded. It is horrific. Absolutely horrific. Jim Jones, I will say, is a very interesting person to listen about. He's like everybody, a super complicated person. I highly recommend the series that Case File does on this. He did it absolutely beautifully. He does not skip anything. There's no stone left unturned. So I highly recommend that series for people if you want to learn more about the People's Temple. Because there's a lot I didn't even know, and I've watched a lot of stuff about that.
Yeah, so weird fact about Jim Jones. There's actually pictures of him when he was a little bit younger, and then pictures of my grandpa. And my grandpa actually looked like Jim Jones in certain pictures.
What? That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's nuts. Because my mom has always said, like, don't drink the Gatorade. Like, you know, don't drink the water. Like, I've always heard those, and to learn the reason behind that, it's so sad. That's crazy, though, with your grandpa. That's crazy.
Yep, looks like him. I thought it was funny.
That's crazy. Because there's a lot of, like, homophobic things that happen, and like everything else, the cult is very sexual. And
so my favorite homophobic thing that happened with it, and this cracks me up so much, is that Jim Jones would tell all the men that they were gay, and the only way for them to not be gay and for their salvation was for them to give him a blowjob.
Yeah.
And it's like, huh?
Oh, how does that work? Okay. Like, your logic doesn't match mine, but okay. Whatever, buddy. So, next one we're going to talk about is Children of God. So, this is one of many names for this cult. This is the first one that it starts out with. It was founded in the late 60s by David Berg. The reason for the name changes is there's a lot of abuse allegations that come to the surface, so they kind of rebrand the cult. That's why their name changes so many times. the most famous members of this cult, there's a couple, but most people will know River and Joaquin Phoenix. They actually grew up in the cult for a little bit of time, and Rose, I forget Rose's last name. She's an actress. She's another famous person that was part of this cult at one time. The other names that this cult goes by is Family of Love and the Family International, or the Family, depending on where you're at. Basically, they wanted to spread the message of salvation, apocalypticism, and a spiritual revolution and happiness, and the distrust of the outside world. Basically, they foretold of a antichrist dictator type person, and there would be a rise of a brutal one world government, and it would be overthrown by the second coming of Christ. David communicated to his people with, or followers with, letters, and those became known as the Mo letters, because he called himself so many names, but he said that he was God's prophet. But they are actually most known for flirting fishing. So basically, they would kind of tell the women of the cult to go hook up with potential converts and start a sexual relationship with these people, to get them to convert to the cult. By 1972, they stated that they had 130 groups worldwide, and by the late 70s, they had colonies in 70 different countries. I want to say there's a series about the children in this group. I forget where we watched it. It might have been Netflix. They talk about the behind the scenes of this. It talks about a couple of girls that they interview, and the abuse because it's horrible child abuse that happens. A lot of grooming, a lot of sexual abuse. I want to say that show is on Netflix. Really want to say. The next one we're going to talk about is the branch Davidians. So this is a cult that...
Sorry, what did you just call them?
The branch Davidians. That's the original name. Yep. And it is the cult that was out in Waco, Texas.
You mean the branch Davidians?
Davidians, whatever. I've had a long morning.
I was like,
Davidians.
Is this something I don't know?
Look. Whatever mind spiciness I got going up in here has been
good,
fucking horrible this last week. Like, I don't know what's happening. The ADHD in whatever's going on up here, full fucking force right now. Full force.
Yeah, you're good.
Full force. It's fucking horrible. But everybody knows this is the cult behind Waco, Texas. And this is interesting. And I want to say Case File does a podcast episode on this, but I'm wrong. I'm more than likely wrong. But basically, David Koresh. That's actually not his actual name.
David
Koresh. That's not his given name. That is the name that he gives himself within the cult, because he calls himself, again, multiple names based on David. But he believes that he can talk to God. He thought the world was ending. They have over 100 members. Basically, they're into polyamory, having super young brides. But they're most known for the raid that happens in 93. So we'll get to that. But basically, the branch was founded by Benjamin Rodayan in 1955. This was kind of a part of the General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. Back to Mormonism again. But that part because it's like a big branch. So you have the original group, which was founded in 1935, and then you have the group that Benjamin founds from this original group, and then you have the branch that David creates. So it's a lot of splintering that happens. But basically, this is kind of an offshoot of Seventh-day Adventists, because Victor's ideas were rejected. So he gathered up all his followers in the 1930s, and they moved to Waco and bought a big property, and that's where they were. But they wanted to restore the Davidic kingdom of Israel, whatever that means. I didn't look up that. But basically, David Koish, whatever, is his birth name is Vernon Howell. He rose to power because he was actually having an affair, or he was her consort, I guess, to Benjamin Rodin's wife, Lois. So that's kind of how he rises to power and stuff. He wanted to create a line of world leaders, but the fact that he wanted to create a line of world leaders, this is what kind of serves as the excuse, or not the excuse, the reason behind the ATF raid, because there were allegations of a lot of child abuse that happens, sexual abuse and illegal weapons. So on February 28th of 1993, the ATF go into the compound with the goal of arresting David. This starts a 51-day standoff, and at the end of it, 75 people are dead, including David. 4 ATF agents are killed, 16 are wounded. The FBI eventually gets involved because of the dead ATF agents.
Well, so if I could, there is a lot that went on during the whole Waco siege, and
there was a lot. I'm just condensing.
Yeah, both sides are responsible for how awry the whole thing went, both the government and the individuals involved. And let me tell you, if you look it up, it is a complete shit show.
It is. Stuff ends up on fire. Like, it is horrible what happens. It's an absolute shit show of how everything was handled. Everything. Horrible. They were able to negotiate the release of 19 children before everything kind of started to hit the fan. But yeah, that was bad. That was bad. The next one we're going to talk about is GateAum. Shinrikyo. I'm going to butcher that. So I'm going to call him Soko. Because that's his actual name. Basically, it's founded in the 80s. Shoko Ashariah. He claimed to be Christ. At one point, he had tens of thousands of followers. And this cult actually starts in Japan. This is a Japanese cult, and they are known for a very horrific thing. But basically, it started out as a meditation and yoga class, and it slowly progressed from there to kind of an end of the world cult. It gained its official status as a religious organization in 1989. It would attract a lot of Japanese, of a lot of Japan's elite universities graduates. It became known as the religion of the elite. His mission was he was taking it upon himself the sins of the world, and he claimed he could transfer spiritual power to his followers and ultimately take away their sins and their horrible deeds that they have done. they originally weren't really associated with anything major. He became really obsessed with biblical prophecies. They kind of started their own like propaganda campaign through comics, animated cartoons. They would attempt to put their religious ideas into popular anime and manga at the time. How do you pronounce that? Magna themes. So they would put out their
It's
own
manga. Sorry, I
manga.
forgot I was muted. Yeah, I forgot I was muted. I'm like here answering you, and then I'm just like, oh wait, shit.
I could see your lips move. But basically, he was putting out his own propaganda, and this all leads to a head on March 20th in 1995. Followers leave 5 bags filled with a toxic nerve agent on 3 Tokyo train lines during rush hour. This causes 13 people to die. Over 5,000 people were injured. As months went by, they tried to do another subway attack. Unfortunately, it failed. Soko plus 12 other members were sentenced to death. 7, including the founder, were executed in July of 2018.
Yeah,
and
so he's actually pretty interesting individual.
Yeah.
But he was actually blind in one eye and went to a blind kids school.
Yeah.
And
yeah, you can tell in his picture.
Yeah. And then he like tricked all these people and gave them all his money, but like you said, a lot of the people that followed him were like actual intellectuals and stuff, and they bought into all of his BS.
Yeah. That's what amazes me is it's a lot of these smart kids that go to a lot of these elite Japanese universities that got roped into this. So that is astonishing. So the next one we're going to talk about is Heaven's Gate. This is another mass suicide one. This started in the early 70s by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. They dubbed their followers the Crew. Applewhite was basically kind of the center of this. He told his followers a lot of things, mainly that he was the second coming of Christ, the world was ending, and that God was an alien. They believed that they could transform themselves into immortal extraterrestrial beings by rejecting human nature, and they would ascend into heaven. A lot of this changed after Nettles' death of cancer in 1985. This kind of challenges their views. But basically, just like every cult, they were isolated from their family. They were to give all their possessions away, and they would go on a master cleanse of lemonade, cayenne pepper, and maple syrup. And this was to help get rid of any sexual thoughts that they had. 8 male members of the group actually volunteered to get castrated. But they are, like I said, known for the mass suicide that happens. 39 members total die. They drink a concoction of vodka, and they eat applesauce and pudding, which contains barbiturates, and they put a bag over their head to suffocate themselves. They all wear the same outfits. And I think you told me there's change. Is this the one where there's change in the pocket?
Yeah, there's an exact, I don't remember the exact number, but there's change in the pocket. They wear the same jogging suit and the exact same limited edition Nikes. Interesting fact about Heaven's Gate is that the great late actress Nichelle Nichols, who was iconic for her role as Uhura on Star Trek, the original series, and multiple of the movies that came out from the original crew, her brother was one of the cult members.
Yeah. That's crazy.
But yeah, they actually their website is still active because all but 4 members, quote unquote, joined the spaceship, and their website is still active. You can still contact them for information.
Yeah. That one was crazy. And then the most famous and the most creepy is Charles Manson and the family. So this starts in the late 60s, and Charles Manson is a very interesting character. In and out of prison, and he's a very intelligent and a very manipulative person. And the shit that man got away with is absolutely astonishing.
Well, did you know that Manson actually got the most of his beliefs for like Helter Skelter and all that from another cult?
Yes. I don't remember what one though.
It's the Fountain Cult. That it was in Los Angeles from the like 60s and into the 70s.
Yeah.
The WKFL Foundation of the World Cults. That's actually an interesting one. Quick aside here.
No, you're fine.
That's actually an interesting one because the members of that cult, 2 of the members kept trying to get their wives and kids to leave, and their wives wouldn't leave because the guy that ran it had such an issue. The guys actually bought explosives like dynamite for a project, a landscaping project they were working on, and went to talk to the main guy and blew themselves up to kill the guy to free their family. So the 2 guys committed suicide in order to take the leader of that cult out to free his family.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But back to Charles Manson.
Sorry,
he was in the news. No, you're fine. I was like, Charles Manson was in the news not too long ago when he passed away, because of the person claiming his body. So
who claimed his body?
His son. But it was a lot of hoops and stuff to prove that he was his son, and there's so much drama revolving around Charles Manson's body. But they settled in Spokane Ranch. It was a former movie TV studio in LA. There was a lot of drugs, and again, we've worked our way from present to backwards. So you have to think during the late 60s, LSD is becoming known, and it is being experimented with. So part of Charles Manson's thing is obviously brainwashing through the use of LSD. Charles Manson and the family during this time, which I thought was interesting. So they become part of a clinical trial of the use of LSD on the brain. And David Smith, who is one of the physicians at this clinic that Charles Manson and the family are a part of, he actually writes a book about the clinical trials that he was a part of, and he writes about Charles Manson manipulating them through like the family. He watched it happen, of the manipulation and stuff that was happening with the use of LSD, because Charles would not take as big of a dose as everybody else. Yes, he would still take the LSD, but it was a quarter of what everybody else was taking, so that way he could remain in control of everybody. I thought the book is called Love Needs Care, and it is about David Smith's time at the Hyatt Albury Free Medical Clinic. And Charles Manson and the family are actually part of that book because they were part of the clinical trials that was happening at this time. But basically, he controlled everybody through the use of LSD and acid. There was a lot of mandatory orgies and a lot of weird sexual stuff that would happen. And that's how he controlled everybody. And he was pushing his idea of an imminent race war. The cult started when he was released from jail on probation in 1967. Because he moves to San Francisco. That's where he discovers LSD. And that's where he starts becoming a part of the clinical trial. He then reads Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein. Heinlein? Heinlein. Heinlein. It's a sci-fi novel. After that, he starts preaching about self-love. And then we get to what they are most known for. So they are most known for a 2-night killing spree of 5 people. In early August of 1969, they start cruising LA, and they come across a house that the actress Sharon Tate is in, and she's hosting people, and they kill Sharon Tate. They use her blood to write pig on the wall. And that, like, if you see pictures of that crime scene, that is a horrible crime scene. They carve words into the bodies. It's absolutely horrible. So the next night, they kill 2 more people. And not long after that, they all get arrested. Even though Charles Manson is he does not participate in the murders, he is convicted because he kind of pushes this idea that these people need to die with Helter Skelter, the song off the Beatles' White Album. And the trial itself is super fucking crazy. If you look at the pictures, he carves an X into his head, and then the girls carve an X into their head. He gets a swastika in the middle of his forehead. Part of the family camps outside the courthouse, trying to say that they're not guilty and they don't need to be jailed. The trial itself is an absolute spectacle, but he is found guilty of all 7 counts of murder, including Sharon Tate and her unborn baby. So I figured it'd be a good note to end on Charles Manson. I did not know that the trial was over 22 weeks. So some honorable mentions. Rajneesh Purim. There's an actual show called Wild Wild Country on Netflix that is all about this cult. It's actually really interesting. We will definitely do an episode about them because they are super manipulative. Because it's like a Jim Jones type thing. Jim Jones was heavily into the political scene at the time, and so was one of the founders of this Rajneesh thing. Angel's Landing, Church of the Lamb of God, Matamoros cult. They're known in Mexico for their human sacrifices. They were in the news actually not too long ago for that. Order of the Solar Temple. A lot of people know that one because of all these suicides that kind of happened all around the world at the same time. That's what that one is. Russian Doomsday Cult. And I found this in more than one article. It's a really long one. Movement of the Restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. So that's just a brief overview of a lot of cults that popped up during the Satanic Panic. Obviously, there was a lot more, and obviously they're still around if we still have Love Has Won and NXIVM. Obviously, they're still here. They're not going to go away, obviously. They've been around for a very long time. They just kind of get new faces and new names. But I mean, they're kind of the same thing. The leader's the prophet. The end of the world's coming. Give me all your money, and I want your wife too. In a nutshell.
Yep.
In a nutshell. That's what they are. So now time for our bi-weekly tarot card reading. Do you want to go first? I can go.
I can go first.
I can go first. It's fine. So
I can go first.
Are you sure? I can. I got it all ready to go.
We say it at the exact same time.
No,
go ahead.
And I'll edit. I'll make it work. So I have the Night Before Christmas deck, so I pulled the Queen of Presents. It is Mrs. Claus. She's so cute.
Mrs. Whoop?
Mrs. Claus. So it's actually the Queen of Pentacles. Words associated is practicality, creature comforts, and financial security. To meet the Queen of Pentacles is to be ushered into a warm and loving home where you will be nurtured and taken care of. It is easy to see that the greatest joy of the Queen of Pentacles is to take care of others, to make sure that her visitors feel happy. Even when times are tough, the Queen of Pentacles makes do. She finds a use for all things, handle situations with sensibility, practicality, and serenity. For this reason, she is usually adept at her work and has achieved much success in her career. To see her means that you are called to approach the situation with simple common sense, or it is an indication that financial and worldly stability is here.
Okie dokie.
What about you?
So I pulled the Two of Cups. Reversed, actually. So at its essence, the reverse Two of Cups is about self-love. Love in any form starts with love for yourself. When you love yourself unconditionally, you accept and appreciate who you are, and you respect and honor the most authentic version of yourself. You also welcome a life of happiness because you fundamentally believe you deserve it, and you're right. When you come from this place of self-love, self-acceptance, and self-respect, you will have more fulfilling, loving relationships with others. It all starts with self-love. There's a bunch of other stuff here, but I ain't gonna go into all that. So, self-reflection and self-love.
Yeah. Okay. This is what I think. While you do help others and stuff, and you make sure that everybody else is taken care of, you need to make sure that you are also taking care of yourself.
Yes.
And the work that you're putting into making sure everybody else is okay, it's paying off, but it's not going to completely pay off if you don't take time for yourself and take care of you.
Balance in all things.
Which is very true for me right now. Very true. Because, yeah, I feel like I'm getting pulled in 50 different directions and I can't get done what everybody else wants me to get done and what I want to get done. And I've had to stop and step back. Because I'm eventually getting to where I need to be. But I can't be present for everybody if I constantly worry about everybody else and not myself.
Right, because I mean, you got a lot of big things going on with you right now.
Yeah.
And, with our conversation that we had before we started recording and everything and all that jazz, I know you're dealing with a lot there.
Oh, yeah.
You're just going to have to remember to make sure you're taking care of yourself and remember that it's about you.
Oh, I know. I don't like being the center of attention. That's my problem.
I know.
What about you? Does it make sense for you? Does it ring for you?
In part, there's some other stuff involved with the reading that in part relates to that, but also there's other stuff. Yeah,
So you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The hands that you see in the videos are my hands. Please rate, review, and subscribe. And please tell a friend or tell your enemy. It's up to you. If you have a topic you think we should cover, or if you have a book recommendation, you can email us at thewaverdragons@gmail.com. But please rate, review, subscribe, and please, 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 please tell a friend. So until next time,
I'm Johnny.
and I'm Kelsey. Bye.